There's a story today on DNAInfo.com has it that there are people who would like to build an island in Lake Michigan for recreation.
Oh.
Now, this is not the first time. Let's bring in Lizzie Schiffman. She wrote it for DNAInfo.com. She's a great news source, by the way. A lot of former newspaper men and women are there, and they're doing yeoman's work, bringing you the stuff that sometimes the newspapers, I don't know, somehow they don't have enough room to print, because I guess it's expensive because the paper is expensive. And Lizzie, this is not a brand new idea. This idea actually got floated more than a generation ago, by my recollection, maybe 40 years ago. There was the developers who were building the Meadowlands racetrack complex and stadium in East Rutherford, New Jersey, actually pitched then Mayor Richard J. Daley on building an island out there and building a similar sort of thing. Would be a casino, a racetrack, a sports stadium potentially. Where do they want to do this?
Yeah, this is, you're right. This is far from the first suggestion that we've seen to sort of revitalize this area and build some more land out in Lake Michigan. This specific project would stretch from Olive Park to North Avenue Beach.
That's a big island right there. That's like 2 miles, right?
Well, the island wouldn't stretch that far, but it would be a big island, the one they're calling for. It would be about 745,000 square feet. It would go from Oak Street Beach to North Avenue Beach, and its primary purpose would be as a breakwater to sort of control the waves, because they also plan to build out all of the beaches and the lakefront itself to add 60 acres of new green space to the neighborhood.
How will this affect the young lawyers and traders who bought boats and invite young nubile women onto them and bounce around
study sessions
and bounce around in that bathtub area in between Olive Park and Lakeshore Drive? How will it affect their boating over the summer?
That concern has come up in the comment section of our story.
I'll bet. I can name the guy who did it probably. Yeah.
The plan is very preliminary right now. They haven't gone into detail about what this could mean for boat owners, but that's definitely something that people who use Lake Michigan in that way are already concerned about, even though this is a very preliminary plan.
I would just like to remind women who get invited onto those boats that if you get invited on Saturday morning for that afternoon, they already started making invitation calls on Thursday for the vote, and you didn't make the first cut. All right. So what is what's the ostensible use for humans? Will people be able to go out there? Or is this just a big piece of dirt out there?
People would be able to go out there. That's the hope, I think. And the overall impact of the project as a whole for humans is supposed to be a good one. It, among other things, it focuses on fixing the really nasty gridlock we see at Chicago Avenue that affects pedestrians and cyclists and cars as well. And just in general, to make it easier to bring pedestrians, tourists, neighborhood residents from Michigan Avenue and from sort of the more hopping downtown areas all the way to the lakefront without having to contend with, going out of their way to get around Lakeshore Drive.
So, Lizzie, would they have like ferries that would take you out there? Would they catapult you from the top of the Ferris wheel on Navy Pier?
These are all great ideas. You should submit them.
I'm afraid they'd accept them.
Yeah, they might. I don't think they've thought that far in advance. This is super, super preliminary idea.
Oh, yeah.
It's actually coming from, rather than a developer, just a collective of Streeterville residents who, they said that there's construction planned for Lakeshore Drive anyway in the near future, so they want to sort of piggyback on top of that. So that they're just.
I don't understand. I grew up in Streeterville, so I understand what they're talking about here. Streeterville used to be a neighborhood that you could get around in, but then they started building things and that it made it incredibly congested. I mean, every building is bigger than the last, despite the effort by these organizations to try to keep that from happening. I still am a little confused though by what you said originally. How would this help ease congestion in Streeterville? It seems like more people would be coming down there to somehow get out onto this island.
Well, among other things, part of the plan calls for driving a portion of Lakeshore Drive underground.
Like the Big Dig in Boston?
Yeah, similar, just sort of creating a tunnel, which would, at least for that section of the drive, it would make the overpass all green space, totally pedestrian friendly, take the cars out of the equation altogether. So yeah, there's also talk of building more park space that flies over Lakeshore Drive. So it's kind of a combination of bridges and tunnels to create more pathways directly to the lake.
I'm sort of astounded. The more wafting urine smell is sort of all I got out of that. I understand that.
That is an occupational hazard.
It is. Oh, it's true though. I mean, and this big dig, as I seem to recall in Massachusetts when they did this, because it wasn't just Boston, it was Cambridge, and the state was involved, the federal government was involved. I seem to recall there's like 50 people that have gone to prison for the big dig. And I call them pikers in Massachusetts compared to us. I would say if they tried this project, 150 people would go to jail. Federal prison for whatever bid rigging, contract problems. The thing will leak. I mean, God knows what will actually happen. So this island would would Lakeshore Drive go under the lake at that point?
By the time they're talking about the S curve, and they want to,
like
among
at
other
Oak Street,
things.
at Oak,
Right. And they want to, among other things, build the shoreline out further into the lake by a total of 1.2 miles of additional land. So if we get to that point, there will be quite a buffer between the water and where the drive would go underground.
All right, Lizzie, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Lizzie Schiffman, DNAInfo.com. You can read her whole story there today. But this is, all that stuff east of Michigan Avenue that is Streeterville was all landfill after the fire.
Right.
They took all the debris from the fire and some other stuff that I guess other towns had they wanted to throw out, rusty bed springs and things like that, and they threw that all into that area, and they started building with dirt and everything else, and they built up a foundation.
Right.
Which is why, for the spire, remember they're going to put that spire, there's going to be a 200-story building?
Yeah, that hole is still in the ground over there, I think.
Just west of Lake Point Tower.
Right. And
they had to dig hundreds of feet into the ground for the foundation of for that hole you're talking about, because they had to get in the limestone under there, because there's nothing. It's all silt, sand, debris, broken stuff.
The leaning spire of Streeterville in about a year, right?
That was one of the concerns. So they have such interesting thoughts for this, because it's an interesting part of the world, Streeterville, but it is. I don't know.
They should call this Gilligan's Island, because it's going to be slapstick comedy all the way if they try to make this happen, man.
My sense is it will not be happening in our lifetime, but perhaps our grandchildren will be playing on. What they're essentially doing is they're just making the lake smaller by a mile and a half.
I don't understand this thing at all.
I don't get it. All right,
Emmanuel Island, named after the one-term mayor of Chicago.